All right, for this homework, we're supposed to implement the coding questions from our midterm this class. The first question was about the postage on a letter. And so we had to input the weight and find out the weight of the letter. We also needed to know if it was international. So we see out yes or no if it's international, and that is a character. We read that input. We have the post initialized to 0. If the weight is less than or equal to 30 grams, then the post is equal to 41 cents. Else, if it is over, then it is 41 plus a half a cent for every gram that is over. So that is added into the post if it is overweight. And then if it is international, if the person marked Y for yes, so if international is equal to Y, then it's a 15% upcharge. So we will add that into the post. And then it prints out the person's final postage. So that does it for the first problem on our midterm. For the second problem, we had to enter an integer. This was some weird factorials, some jump factorials. So we have our integer, we have a variable for our result to store. So if it's less than 0 or equal to 0, you can't really get a factorial out of a negative number or out of 0. It's just 0. Then if modulo 2 is not equal to 0, we were supposed to find out between odds and evens and do different things for those scenarios. So that was to determine if it is odd or even. And then from there, I just implemented the formulas that were written on the test. So this is for odd, excuse me. This formula is for odd. And I had to include the math header because I used the power function. And then else, meaning that would be an even number, we did the formula for the even jump factorial. And then it prints out the result. All right, for problem 13, we had a dynamic array, and we had to enter, the user could enter a large amount of random numbers, and we were supposed to determine and print out the number of even numbers he or she inputted, the percentage of even numbers, and the average of numbers between 50 and 150. So I actually included an extra array to save some temporary values for later. So while number was greater than 0, as a sentinel, the user could input a positive integer. If that number, mod 2, was equal to 0, meaning that it was an even number, then our integer counter for the evens would update 1. Then if it was less than 100 and greater than 100, there can only be 100 numbers total. So this checks to make sure that we haven't surpassed our total yet. If it is within that range and the number is between 100 and 200, we would save it to our list as the problem asked us to. And then, because we needed to know the average of numbers between 50 and 150, I had another if statement. So if it is within our range of total amounts allowed and it is between 50 and 150, then I added it to the second list. And then finally, if we've made it here, then we update our total. Then once this is finished, once the person has entered that sentinel a negative number or it's 0, then we will have our even counter has been updated. So we simply print out the number of evens, and then the percentage of even numbers will be our evens tally that we kept up with and our total tally. And I even multiplied it by 100 to get the percentage. And then finally, I had an average variable. Now this isn't the final average just yet. We are working through the array that I stored the numbers that were specifically between 50 and 150, and I add each of those numbers to average. So 50 plus 149, whatever they entered that is within that list, because they've already been sorted according to being within that range. So that will give us our total number of all of those. And then we're able to divide it and find out the average. So that does it for that problem. Then for problem 14 was multiplication table, basically. So a low left triangle. This was the bonus problem. It can be a little tricky if you haven't seen these before. You're basically making your own two-dimensional array. So we had to implement a function outside of the main function. So the user can input an integer, but in this case it specifically mentioned a 12 by 12. But what we do is we work through as if it was a 2D array. So j is equal to 1, that is our row number, as long as it is less than or equal to the user input size. Then it will go to this inner nested for loop, where we have I is equal to 1, and we have our set width to make it look appropriate, left align as well. And then it's a multiplication table. So for our first number, it would be in the one column and the one row. So it would be I times j, 1 times 1, and it would print out 1. Uh, I is 1 in this case, and j is 1. So it will only do this once. That is why we put the end line outside of this for loop. So then it will create a new line, and we're ready for our second row. And it will go through correctly making your multiplication table.